Okay, we will call the City of Council workshop for the City of Nisswa to order Tuesday, June 8th, City Hall. First item on the agenda is a compensation study update recommendation from the Personnel Committee. Jenny?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, members of the council. Give me one moment to screen share this so the people in the audience can see it. Oh, maybe not. There we go. Oh, wow. I was feeling good about my technology abilities a little bit ago. Okay. I'll do that. So in your packet tonight, I have provided a memo with a couple of sheets of information regarding our compensation study. And as we talked about at our workshop a couple of months ago now, this is a new process for us, going through the first time updating our pay schedules with Baker Tilly. So we've been working through it and we've made a few adjustments along the way. I will walk the council through the information I provided, and sort of this is where the Personnel Committee is at this point in time as we start to kick off our budget process. So the information I shared with you, and it's in the packet, has a spreadsheet, and I'll walk through the basic information so you can follow along with us. And give me 1 second, find my mouse. Here we go. So the spreadsheet, here's how to orient yourself with the spreadsheet. The first column is I've labeled column A, references base wages including steps. So the first assumption that the committee made was that we would take our current wages as they exist in 2021, and staff who are eligible to receive a step in 2022 would receive the step. So that's what we considered the base wages. And then from there, we start to incorporate the compensation study. And at the top of the spreadsheet, you will see we have some percentages. And from our initial meeting on the study and getting the results, there were 5 or 6 different spreadsheets with different ways to look at the market rates and how they impacted different groups of employees. And initially what we were looking at is separating our Teamsters staff, which would be our police officers and our sergeant, because their data looked to differentiate from the rest of the staff. And so we kept that as a separate group. And then we wanted to look at the general fund staff and our enterprise fund staff. And the reason we looked at them separately was because enterprise funds have to be self-sustaining, and they have to be able to pay for, their operations and expenditures. So we wanted to be as mindful of that as possible in ensuring the sustainability of the funds, of our liquor funds and our sewer funds. However, as I was talking with Ann at Baker Tilly some more over the past few weeks, she said because those percentages are really similar in the market differences, I believe the enterprise fund was 2.5%. Compared with the general fund staff, she said it would be best to be as consistent as possible across as many employee groups as you can. So I adjusted this spreadsheet to basically now reflect 2 different percentage adjustments. So the general fund and the enterprise fund, I'm using the general fund rate because that was the biggest discrepancy. So I erred on the side of a higher adjustment for staff than the lower side. So we have the same percentages there and then the Teamsters percentage. So you'll see that 100% column is referencing what that actual market adjustment is for those groups. And then you'll see a 50% column. So we wanted to see as a committee what 50% of that full market difference was. And so that's what the 50% references. So this first spreadsheet that I have for you references a 50% implementation. And what it does is it calculates taking that 50% mid-range adjustment and it calculates what that cost would be. So for all general fund staff, that would be the $45,895. And for the enterprise fund staff, it's just over $22,000.
So for general fund and police, it's 45,895.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And then, so that's column B, and then column C is just the new base, which is just taking the base, initial base, plus any market adjustment that we make to the new base. Then the next step is thinking about, as part of our regular budget process, what a cost of living adjustment would be, because we still want to include that in our process. And initially, I had, for the personnel committee, I had 4 different percentages just to see different ranges. I mean, we can pick whatever percentage as we go through our budget process, but to get a starting point, I had done 4. I thought 4 just created too many columns on the spreadsheet, so I stuck with 3. And so I have 3 options for you just as a frame of reference: a 2%, a 2.5%, and a 3%. And in my memo, I do reference and provide some information about where the current CPI index is. And so for reference, the last information that I saw in April 2021, the CPI index was at 4.9. Typically this time of year is usually the summer months go higher than early in the year and late in the year. I haven't seen a CPI like this before. This is as high as I've seen it. So I'm not really quite sure what to do with that yet, but it does give some perspective on obviously some things going on. So I dropped my lowest initial COLA percentage from my spreadsheet because I knew probably we weren't talking in the 1% range. We needed to keep moving higher with that. So that's why you have the 2, 2.5, and 3. So those are just the straight a 2% COLA, that column, the vertical column straight down is the COLA cost for each of those groups of employees. Now, the Personnel Committee at this point would like to incorporate into our initial budget for salaries and wages this 50% mid-range market adjustment plus the 3% COLA. So for the general fund, that total cost is the $76,728. And for the enterprise fund, it's $43,412. Before I speak a little bit more on that, I just wanted to explain that. So on the second sheet, gives you the same information, except it assumes 100% market adjustment. So I wanted you to see what those costs would be for that as well. So everything else is the same, but it gives you a full implementation of the midpoint market difference with our data versus the comparable cities. So that's what that is. Yes.
The 76,728.
Yeah.
Is that the market adjustment and the COLA?
Yes.
That's what I thought.
It
I
is,
just
yes.
wanted to make sure.
Yep. Oh, thank you for asking that. Yep. The question that remains, and certainly I would, take feedback from the council tonight. Certainly as we start working through our budget workshops and get more specific into that information is, should the council agree with the personnel committee recommendation or anything as we move forward, how should those costs be incorporated into the budget? Is this strictly, it goes into our operating budget and we address the corresponding levy impacts as they may be? Do we use reserve funds? How do we approach that? Is there a hybrid? I mean, there's different ways to do that. And so I think that would be the feedback that will be very helpful for us as we get through this. Certainly not something we have to, decide on or get any, firm direction. I would love your ideas and your feedback, but that's going to be the big question for that.
Well, I'm not one for taking from one fund and moving it to another one. So I'm not, I'm one who's not for taking it out of the operational fund just to back us. I mean, if I look at this correctly, is it approximately $25,000 per one levy point?
Correct, yes.
So if I look at this, that's a 5% on the levy just to keep us,
At 100%.
right, just to keep us
At the
even.
100% implementation, yes.
If I'm looking at the one. Okay, but that's just
Plus
keeping
the
us going.
COLA. Plus the COLA is factored into that too.
Right, but so you're looking at a 5% levy, okay? That's just to keep us break even.
Mhm.
But next year, year after, these costs are going to rise. So in reality, we can be looking at potentially a 7 to 10% on the levy.
Just meaning including the rest of the budget?
Right, right.
Okay.
And once that levy's set, we can lower, but we can't go any higher, if I understand correctly.
Yes.
Correct?
Yep.
All right.
The enterprise fund doesn't come out of the levy though, correct?
Correct.
The only thing that adds to the levy is the 76,000.
Mhm.
So that's 3 points.
I think he's referencing the 100% implementation, like
Right.
125.
Right.
Oh,
I'm looking
okay.
at the 100%.
All right,
Yes.
so.
Yep.
Yeah.
No,
well, I'm-
you're right though, just to clarify, enterprise funds are self-sustaining. They got to make sure, we got to make that work for each of those.
Definitely on the same page of it's operating costs. It's not gonna, if this was a 1-year only deal, I'd maybe consider taking it from reserve, but if this, and it's not a 1-year deal, and it's just the cost of doing business and it should be factored into the levy.
Right. What with me too, the operational fund should be kept for rainy day fund. I mean, future infrastructure, future repairing of roads, public works, what have we.
You mean the reserve fund?
Reserve fund, excuse me. Yes.
Yep.
I mean, because you start dwindling away at that, you have problems.
I just think it's an inappropriate use of it, but.
Mr. Mayor, what's not included here is the cost of healthcare, which is going to be added
Right.
on top of this.
Right. So that's
you're-
why.
You're looking at more than what you're talking about.
Right, and that's why I'm saying, if I look at both of those right now, 10% at the high, 7 to 10% is what, if I break it down, adding in the healthcare and everything.
Right.
I guess it'd be even higher than that, but.
Right, but that's a,
I think what what you're referring to is when we set a preliminary levy.
correct,
We can't go up. We
Right.
can go down. So you're talking the preliminary levy, but yeah, okay.
right,
And if we do a 50% now, it's going to be 50% next year.
Correct.
50% the year
Correct.
after that. We're always going to be behind.
right. So you've got to raise that levy initially high enough to cover that roll year after year.
Oh, well,
Mhm.
maybe.
I'm not saying exorbitant, but keep that in mind. I don't want to be caught with my pants down 5 years from now going, oh, where's the money?
Well, I know I mean, I look at, obviously for preliminary levy purposes, when we looked at this at the personnel level, we were looking at, okay, how do we get everybody up to where they need to be? And you got to remember too, there's the yearly operating costs. So the equipment replacement, all that kind of stuff is fuel is higher this year already than it was last year. Okay, all those operating, what's that going to look like? That's why you have a 4.9. I mean, I've seen it that high at the end of the year before, but typically it hasn't been like that for a while. So I'm thinking 3 to 3.5 is where hopefully we end. I hope, but a lot of that's going to depend on what they do out east. Let's face it. So, I would like to see, if the money comes out of the savings, it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so it's got to be absorbed into the levy. And we're back to, okay, folks, and I'm talking about the taxpayer in the city,
Right.
what do you want? It's, what do you want? And again, I'm more than willing to make their decision for them. We as a council can do that, but some input from people, which we never, really don't seem to get a lot of.
Well, of course, people will always say, we don't want a tax rate that high, cut something.
Yeah.
That's the response.
And my question to them then is, what do you want? What do you want to get rid of? What don't you want?
And they're not going to have the expertise to look at a budget and say this and that,
Yeah.
whatever.
I
So
agree with that 100%.
True.
They're not gonna put in the time.
They're not going to put in the time to educate
They-
themselves.
They
is what
just
you're
want,
saying.
they just
So they want us to make their
want
decision
the
for them.
amenities and they want the taxes.
Right. But it's not going to get less. I mean, I think what you're going to find is if COVID did anything, it showed that I don't have to be in an office down in Minneapolis or St. Paul or even out in Illinois. I can stay at my cabin and I can work. And it's going to put more pressure and more stress on infrastructure, everything around here. And so, from a preliminary standpoint, from just for budgeting purposes, yeah, look at the 100% like Mark is saying, okay, I get it. There's 5 levy points. The enterprise fund should be able to absorb itself. But, but the 50-50 thing we were looking at was how can we, I think we know we can absorb 50% in a levy this year. But then again, we got to do it again next year, but you have to understand that 50% is going to be a little higher than the 50% from this year because there's going to be inflation factored in and everything. So are we,
that's true unless you cut back in some areas severely.
correct. Do you start cutting back and saying, okay, I guess you guys are going to have to drive those cars a year longer. I guess you're going to have to drive that truck a year longer, et cetera. Now you start getting into potential safety issues. Some of those vehicles maybe shouldn't be on the road that extra year. I mean, that's kind of why we have the amortization schedules factored in. And I mean, I've driven those old ones. You've driven some of the old fire trucks that you're kind of wondering going down the hill if the brakes were going to actually work. That's not a good feeling.
No, I mean, that's something that you can't fall behind on that.
No, nope.
I guess the recommendation was to do the 50%, correct?
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask. I want to see
So
where we're
that
at with that.
recommendation- In that recommendation, are we recommending that it's 50% this year and 50% next year? Or are we just saying it's 50% and then until the next time we do the study again and then see where we're at?
So there is no answer to that yet.
Okay.
There's a few reasons for that. One, you haven't seen what the rest of the budget is going to look like for 2022, or at least preliminarily. So when you have pressures from all sides, likely, as we're knowing, costs are increasing across the board for everything, you have to prioritize. So there's the potential for that. You want to have that information in front of you to be able to look at that. Health insurance, as Councilmember Jacobson brought up, is another potential factor. And then there's also, as a committee, we discussed that I think Ann referenced it as kind of a margin of error within the study responses, which was a 5%. So plus or minus 5%, you're considered within range. So we were trying to make a significant adjustment at this point to incorporate something, figure out what else is a part of the next year's budget, and then kind of see where things land. I'm certainly a proponent in making sure we have plenty of room to work out those details with our preliminary budget. I don't want to set it too short. I want to give us room to have those discussions. But there's also that factor as well. So those are kind of some of the variables. I mean, I'm certainly more than fine, incorporating 100%. I think that's just going to be from a council perspective, a difficult discussion. That's just my perspective on that.
Another thing that's going to hurt us is the way the home sales are going.
Right.
The valuations are going up and the county taxes are going to be going up considerably in certain areas. So you have that, and then you have the city costs here. It's going to be a double whammy on the residents up here. So I think I have to think about that too.
The other thing too that you have to look at is in the near future, adding staff. That's my opinion.
Well, like Ross said, though, this is the cost of doing business.
Yep.
Well, it is.
You know,
I mean,
I
that's the
mean,
thing.
and-
But, I think too, we've never put pressure on to reduce the budget.
True.
And at some point, something has to give. And so, I think, I mean, kind of coming in here, and I haven't really heard anything change my mind, was to do the 50%. But then also see where we only have a 2% raise in the budget, the rest of the budget, the operating part of it. And that's a decrease in the budget because, we're probably, that normally is probably going to be 4 or 5% increase with the cost of living or whatever. But to go down that road to start, I mean, something's got to give. And I think that, again, with this increase, we just need, we need to expect the best out of our department heads. And we need to hold them to maybe a higher standard, in an appropriate way. But, this is part of their responsibility. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. We're comparing everything, but most places their supervisors don't get 40-hour weeks plus overtime. And I think that's, because now you throw in, we're bringing it up, and then they get a bunch of overtime. Now, and that's, if we want to be fair and do this fairly comparing to other cities, that needs to be factored in there. And a conversation I had with Jenny is it's just going to become overtime, especially for the supervisors, is approved.
Department heads, you mean?
Department heads is approved. It's, and you look at things like, we have Tom plowing the streets. He's our highest paid person, getting time and a half plowing a street. Does that even make sense?
Right.
And as a department head, Tom should be thinking, does this even make sense? That's what I'm talking about is, we just, I have no problem, but we need to see some value. And I get some of it's just up their pay to be equal. We need to get some value back because there's been quite a few raises in the last, and again, we got behind and it's not, but going forward, I don't want to hear rumblings that, people are having trouble because we have a city administrator or whatever, and we need to all get on the same page and expect more.
Have you got any, I know you shared this with staff.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Have we got any feedback from department heads?
No,
Okay.
I have not.
So if you go to setting a preliminary levy, being conservative, you just say, okay, we shoot for the idea is from the personnel committee, and I agree with it, is the 50%. That was our proposal, okay? I think, and I'll just step ahead of Jenny. I think our idea was 50% this year, 50% the next year, and we're within compliance. We're within that 5%. But the 50% the next year, we can't say because of what she had mentioned. We don't have other numbers. We need to know where everything else within the budget is going to fall. So, but if you're going to do a preliminary levy, if you wanted feedback for that, where do we set the preliminary levy? If you anticipate, say the 5 levy points just to bring us at 100% compliance, okay, just for figuring, that makes sense planning wise. But Ross is correct. Where's some feedback? How do we get there from point A to point B? What can we do? What can everyone help us with? That's why the department heads are there, it is to think outside the box on this stuff, work with you and everyone else. Again, or just like taxpayers, if they don't want to take the time to educate themselves or learn about it or even contact and talk about it and figure stuff out, then you're saying to me, you folks decide. And I mean, we need input, constructive, input. I think we all agree we don't want to lose employees.
Yep.
We understand that. It's inevitable, I guess, at some point, somebody will have a better opportunity or some other entity someplace may provide them with more of a professional growth opportunity than we can. Cost of doing business again. But we don't want to lose anybody. We got good staff and they do an awesome job.
But, it's, again, you just can't keep taking. I mean, at some point, it's gotta, we gotta try to, and I don't believe that, we're running fat,
No, I think our.
but.
No,
budgets
and,
are
and
pretty-
to be
But again,
fair,
just because of the cost of everything, I think that, to say, let's get everyone, we're gonna give them plenty of time to work on it. Maybe not as much as I had hoped, but, to say, a 2% raise on the levy or whatever, Jenny, that makes, a 2% the above and beyond the wage increase of the doing this.
okay, thank you. That helps give context.
Yeah, if you
Okay.
go,
But
if you
the
go,
operating side of it to say,
Okay.
okay, where can we go here? And, maybe we look at the mileage on the cars and, maybe but then again, if you skip 1 year,
It throws your whole schedule off.
but you're only skipping 1 year. Because the next year you're gonna have to replace a car because now it's got more miles on it. So
Right.
I don't.
The other thing you have
I'm
to
not
remember
big
is how
into-
long it's taking
I'm not
to
big
get
into,
this.
well, we'll make this year look good, but then we'll just do it next year type thing. So that gets, but, my other question here real quick, though, before I get, so, John, you kind of made the comment, the enterprise fund is fine, but is it? That's $190,000 out of, at the 100% at least, that's out of the enterprise fund. Can the enterprise fund sustain that?
Enterprise fund has.
Enterprise fund is
quite a bit of-
66,000,
What?
66. The 190 is the total of everything.
Oh, no, right.
66,000.
But,
Yeah.
but still still a fair
But yeah,
question.
yeah,
It's,
can it-
no,
I
that's
mean, yeah,
important, yes.
can it,
Yep.
so,
To Mark's point over here, 66,000 this year. But that's going to continue to grow every year. That 66,000 will get bigger and the fund has to continue to be able to absorb it. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I think Ross is right. I hate to say this, but I think we should go with the 50% for salaries. And then we'll look at the operating budget, just be real mean and say, we're not going to go more than 2.5%, something like that. And you better get the numbers down to that range with the operating budget.
and, and again, I would want, for myself, I'd want to see how we're gonna get there and what's, what is gonna be cut or where we can save. Just, I guess, just so, otherwise you're gonna start cutting stuff and then the next year you're just throwing it back in. I guess I'd rather know how we're getting there.
Yep.
To have the
course,
facts
yeah.
of how
Yep.
we're reaching this and what, where we can save and what we can do and then see, next year where everything is and, I mean, we would not do a study again next year though, right?
No,
no,
no.
I
So,
think we need to.
and I don't either,
Yeah,
but,
we
just.
were looking at every
Every
couple,
2 years.
2 years.
2 years.
2 or
3
3, yeah.
years.
So, but I also agree with Ross too. I'd like to see from the department heads the areas that they could possibly save.
Mhm.
And to be fair, like
And
Jenny
you said
said,
you-
our department heads have done that and we are pretty lean. I know.
Yep.
Oh, I don't think, yeah, I don't think that we're, I don't think there's tons of stuff out there, but we just have to. I mean, we just gotta, you can't just keep throwing everything at it and.
Right. Well, the other thing we have to remember is later in this same workshop, we're gonna come up, we're gonna be talking capital improvement plans for departments. So that's a levy increase.
Well,
That's the thing. So, there is a bottom to this well.
that's
And
the.
You mean it's not the abyss?
And that is,
No.
to find the balance, to find that balance that, shows the employees appreciation and where they should be, but yet, maintains what the city needs and, I mean, that's the hard part.
Yep. So I am hearing a little bit of a split in terms of if we're going to continue with the 50% or the 100%.
I'm for the 50%. I was just looking at the 100% because I want to be more on the liberal side of pushing what the levies have to be.
Sure.
So, because, yeah, this year you've got the 50. Next year, most probably, don't know, but would be the 50. So that's why I just look on the higher side.
Okay, got it.
And
So I can work with my numbers when it comes into the budget.
And when I say the 100%, I'm only saying that would be the high end of where we would set a preliminary levy
Right.
Okay.
through budgeting
To work through
purposes
it.
and stuff.
To
So
work
that,
in. Okay,
just to cover our backside. So when it comes down, it's obviously, again, we can decrease, we can increase. But I'm sticking, with the 50%. We might find we can do better or not. Don't know. But once all the numbers come in, and I think, we don't know what the economy is really going to do. And if it really does rebound and start to take off in spite of what keeps happening, that will make a big difference too.
Well, I
And
think.
if we do start having more people hanging around all year, working out of their homes and stuff, that's going to bring more money into town. It's going to bring to the gas stations and the businesses and stuff.
One who
Little
deals
bit.
with a lot of seasonal people, yes, they're coming back earlier.
But that is true too, to see even just what the economy is gonna do in the next year, not to throw. How much is the Baker Tilly study? How much was that?
I think around 4,000.
I mean, I'm sitting here looking at next year, trying to evaluate, how do we evaluate next year? And for $4,000 to have them do another study just to see where we're at, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems pretty reasonable money when you're talking a possible increase, or just seeing, where we're at. It's just food for thought.
Okay.
Because I'm sitting here
I
trying
can-
to evaluate, okay, next year, and it's hard and, because I agree, I understand we're trying to get to this, middle of the road in the wage comparison, but, I mean, you're still talking, quite a bit of money.
I'll get in trouble and say, just because your mother ever say to you, if the other kids jumped off the bridge, would you jump just because they did?
There, okay.
And sometimes we have to say, this is what a position is worth to us, period. And stick to, instead of keep going up all the time.
Point made.
Yeah, I mean,
Yep.
like I said,
Point
it's,
made.
when you're talking 1-2%, that's different than when you start talking the percentages we're talking. I mean, it's.
Especially the land prices in the county and the school district and everything.
Just so I'm clear.
Yeah.
So I get it. And so any staff members that are here, anyone's watching and listening understands this, what we're talking about percent wise or levy wise is on top of
Yes.
whatever COLA is that we adjust the budget for. No,
No,
no.
no.
Okay. So
This is what it is. Like, that's the number. That's the
'cause
adjustment.
We're figuring 3% COLA.
Right.
Yeah.
Are you going to throw those numbers into the mix now for her to go ahead and start working on the regular budget?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm-
I
I'm-
I don't know if you want to offer an opportunity for questions or comments?
Yeah, I would love to.
Okay.
Anyone, please. Questions, comments? Nothing. Okay.
Perfect. The next item I have for you is just an update.
Oh,
Oh, Amber's coming. Will you hit the mic? Thanks.
Okay, so I've clearly been hearing what I can hear, because I've been out in the hallway. So I just want to say, I appreciate the dialogue on this. I think I'll speak for myself. I think one of the things department heads are kind of wondering is like, me specifically year over year, like what's it gonna look like? If it's a 50% this year, like what's the future plan? Which I know you guys just said it's really hard to predict year over year, but that's kind of one of those things as we're developing our strategic plans. That's what you guys have asked from us. We're also asking from you guys, like, how do we plan? Like, what are we hoping for with the budget? We all know that we can't be first. We can't have everything right now. So whether it's wages, whether it's our capital plan, we're looking from you guys for direction on kind of like, how do we want to move forward? What is the year over year plan, not just this year?
okay. Fair enough. If I may. When it comes to finances, I get her permission before I speak, because then I'm wrong. Because I'm probably going to butcher this, and if I do, stop me. We were out of compliance with comparable worth. We came into compliance 4 years ago with comparable worth. The city had a study done. It was an expensive study, but it had to get done, and then we implemented it. Now we're talking staying in sync. We're in compliance with comparable worth. We're out of step with our comparable cities. Okay, so it's two different things. And we'd already talked about that of instead of like they recommend about every 5 years you do a comparable worth study. I believe it was, but we've been staying in sync with our comparable worth. We really don't have to do a study. And Ann from Baker Tilly did say we are in compliance.
Our comp worth is required every 3 years.
Yeah.
By the state.
Oh, okay. All right.
So
And then
it's
we were
the
looking-
market adjustment.
Right. And we were looking at doing this now with our comparable cities every were we talking 2 years?
We've talked to, right, because we've gone 5. Seems like that's too long. So is
Yeah.
it 2? Honestly, is it
Yeah.
3? I feel like it's going to be one or the other.
So 2 to 3 years, we'll be doing what we just did now
Yep.
for bounce with our cities and stuff. And I know that's what
Yep.
we came up with, correct?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Well, I mean, that's something my hope is by the end of this year's budget process, we'll have a decision on the frequency of the compensation study, because it needs to happen more quickly than the 5-year process. So if it's 2 years or 3 years, Amber's has a fair point. This is the first year we're really trying to, across the board, develop all of these plans. So it's a lot. It is a lot for everybody to digest, and we just have to take it one step at a time. To be perfectly honest, part of the challenge too is that I have staff who aren't represented by a bargaining unit, and I have staff who are, and I want to give those bargaining units the opportunity to be at the table. So I'm looking for that feedback to get that going. That's important. I don't want to make decisions or assumptions on this side without considering that. So that's what, my hope is, from a feedback loop perspective, I need to know what's important.
Does that answer your question
So,
or not?
so
I'll say it's not really a question, but just more of a
Yeah,
statement.
did-
I go about
Does
stating-
that, does that help?
Yeah,
you-
and I think that's just, the feedback from you guys in this meeting,
Yep.
going in through the whole budget process.
And that's one of the advantages of having Jenny or a city administrator versus having to come to a council every time to make, or council liaisons, okay? You've got that person there every day, and that information can then be battered back and forth between those of you who have to make these decisions. So it's much simpler that way.
But part
I
of-
would really ask that all department heads make use of that positive advantage. Let's do it. So,
Amber, but you were more talking too about your budget for Park and Rec in your, which is what I believe we're trying to now address with the council goals and the long-term plans is, I think that's something that you're gonna find this council is very interested in doing, is figuring out what our costs are gonna be down the road and how we're gonna meet them. Did I kind of pick that up in what you were asking?
Yeah, I think,
Well, you got the one part of it, but I think she was also asking about, her budget and,
yeah, I think
things that are
Direction.
coming up, the skating rink and
as
the,
you guys have all talked, it plays off each other and what is the levy increase and just kind of like, how do I prioritize, all the needs that we might have in conjunction with all the needs that Public Works has with police and like kind of how does it fit together? We all have needs, we all have wages, that cost of everything's all going up. And so just kind of not what's just the plan this year, but as this all kind of unfolds, what's the year over year plan? What's the year over year to make sure that the wages do stay where they need to be? What's the plan to make sure that like equipment's needing to be replaced when it needs to be replaced? And how do we kind of,
So, see, what I'd like to see is for department heads to dream big independently. I don't want Amber to worry about Public Works, what their budget needs to be, what there needs to be. I want them to have their own needs where they can save where they see themselves in 5 years. And they come to you and then you talk with them and say, well, is this really a priority? And then that comes to us.
But it's
like
also
John said,
fair.
that's why you're there. And because dream big, because otherwise, you never know. Don't be afraid to ask. You gotta let them know that.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
do they know that? Not to be afraid?
Well,
I know it's
we're working on that. I mean, that's that's difficult. It is difficult historically across the board with government where when there's an ad, that's a big deal to bring that forward. So, that's not a common thing to do. And that's something, we need to be able to put it out there and talk about it.
and I know it can be hard with the city councils revolving in out.
Yeah.
You never know, but take advantage of your advantage when you have it.
Yep.
my question to you, Jenny, is, are we not kind of headed in that direction?
Oh, I think we are 100%.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
yes.
what, I
Yep.
mean, I think
Yep.
this is a big undertaking.
Yep.
This is something we've never done.
Right.
At least, I know the 8 years prior I was on was never done, and it's certainly never, so, I mean, and I hope, Amber, we're headed in that direction. Our thoughts are not only today, but what's tomorrow gonna look like, and will we have the funds to get us there?
and it's helpful to hear to just like, go big, dream, make your list, and we'll start prioritizing. So like, for me, that's helpful feedback.
Yep.
Right, and I've talked to Amber about that too. I mean, and she's trying to nudge Parks and Rec Commission to think that way.
Great, big, yeah. Yeah.
So are you
All right.
good?
I'm good, yes, thank you for that item. I included in the packet just information on our health insurance renewal because we have received the information. Our 3 plans increased, or the premiums are set to increase 5.5%, 8.5%, and just under 8% starting in September. Just for your information now, I just wanted to share it with you because I know it is a thought in your mind as well as staff as far as budgeting and how that works. So happy to answer any questions. This is for your information for today. Okay, great. Now I will get my PowerPoint. So. Perfect. Okay, I'm going to stand. So I provided to the council my PowerPoint slides. I've also provided for your information for later. I've given you copies of all of the staff 2021 council goals, all of the detail, if you'd like to see that. And when I'm done presenting, Councilmember Fraley also gave me a memo to give to the council with just some thoughts and ideas for you. So you have that as well. Okay. So I'm going to spend a few minutes tonight just going high level over the 2021 council goals. As of this point in time that we have been working on it from a staff perspective. Why are we doing this? Well, this was originally brought up by Councilmember Utzinger as a way to spark our need to do some long-term planning, to engage staff, to create those systems that we haven't had the opportunity to do before now. And as part of his initial presentation in February, he kind of created, it was almost like a mission statement for this idea. But just a few things that I picked up on, which I really like. So promoting best practices, preserving our natural resources, expanding business in an efficient, purposeful manner, maximizing our services and revenues, and providing a roadmap for the future of the city. As we started off in this process, I was trying to think about how we connect all these things together. And I kept thinking back to the comprehensive plan and going back to that and wanting to use that document regularly and ongoing and not letting it sit on the shelf. And the comprehensive plan is our, overarching guiding document for this city and providing direction. We know we have our budget and our annual, creation of that, setting our needs and establishing what services we're going to create for the future. And to me, this council goals project kind of linked those two things together. In our comprehensive plan, they talk about strategies within each major category. And for me, council goals, it didn't really sound like how to explain that to someone. If you say, oh, we're working on our council goals, I thought that sounded really weird. So what I would like to see is I would like to see this become our strategic plan. So in our comprehensive plan, we have our strategies, and our strategic plan will be the way that we implement those strategies in our comprehensive plan. And we have to use our budget and our resources and figure out what revenues we have to be able to implement. So those are kind of the three-legged stool approaches, the way I see it happening. So for 2021, what our departments did was just sort of establish a baseline of where we are now. So you'll find as you review the detail sometime later, they identify some projects that are currently working on. Codification is one of those projects. I can say we had started working on that before we started this project, but that certainly helps advance one of our goals. It helps just to get us talking and sparking ideas for future priorities. Talking across departments is great. It's getting out of our own little silos and trying to collaborate on things. It's also a way for the council and staff to see all the needs across the city. Because for this council, it's important for you because you're going to have to prioritize what those needs are. And likely everything you will see during this next budget season will be important, but not everything can be first, right? So we have to figure out how to do that. And so for everyone to see these things together, I think will be really great. It does not, so this 2021 sort of measuring, it does not include those detailed questions, the who, what, where, when, why, how. That just got into a lot deeper place than really we had the capacity to do for this year. It doesn't include cost estimates, and it didn't involve all levels of staff, which was an important piece, especially to Councilmember Utzinger. But we will do those things in 2022, at least for the most important top priorities items for departments. They will incorporate those details, and they will provide all staff feedback to the council. So from staff to department heads to myself to you, you'll at least see the list. And then it'll be my job and the department head's job to explain why something makes the budget or makes a priority or doesn't. So as you know, here are the 5 categories and for our strategic plan. And what I'll do is just highlight some of the themes throughout each category that I saw when I reviewed all of the staff's feedback. So for our long-range infrastructure plan, establishing a 10-year plan for all of our city building needs. For example, repairs and updates at City Hall, Equipment replacement schedule, establishing that citywide. We did that in Public Works this past year, which was great. But we should have something similar across all departments. Establishing proper reserve accounts to maintain our infrastructure. We have to start somewhere, and getting a little bit into the budget in the major categories and continuing to grow them is important. And then looking at our citywide infrastructure, so our roads, our sewers, parks, those bigger facilities that are used by the public and the community, not just staff, or at least a majority just staff. Establishing our 10-year plan. For example, roads has a 40-year cycle. I mean, as long as we have a cycle and we know what to plan for, that's really the goal. So those were some of the major themes that I saw across departments for that category. For our policy and our ordinance synchronization, establishing a schedule to review our ordinances and policies. We're getting better and we're picking away at them, but we do have some policies, more internal things, some bylaws, some things like that haven't been touched in 10, 15 years. And we should be looking at them on some kind of rotation to make sure that they are compliant with statute, that they match other city policies, and that we're not creating conflicts within each other. Coordinating policies that impact multiple departments. Just a week or two ago, it came up that with our new personnel policy update, created a slight conflict with the fire department process and how we reimburse for purchases. Oh, now we can't foresee everything, but if we have a system to look at those things, hopefully we have a little better checks and balances. And new legislation, something I've been trying to work more diligently on this year, and I'm hopeful to help department heads especially move forward with this, is to have more of a feel on what's going on with the legislation, be able to report to the council and adjust our ordinances or policies as necessary. For our employee retention and satisfaction plan item, I had, as expected, there were a lot of ideas all across the board in varying degrees. So I'm just going to highlight a handful of them, but please take a look at that one especially, because I think that there's just a lot of great ideas that will help us move forward in providing kind of the best staff experience we can. As we talked about just a little bit ago, our compensation study. So every however many years, is that 2 years, is that 3 years? I think as we finish our budget season in 21, we should have that figured out. Promoting from within when there's an opportunity. Providing opportunity to volunteer. Look at flexible scheduling. As COVID has taught us, we can do things remotely. And so long as we're considering the public service, customer service side of things, are there opportunities for that as well? Having city-sponsored team building activities. Employee benefits. Those change, what may have been important or the typical benefit package 10, 15 years ago might not be as relevant today. So how can we maintain flexibility in looking at those things for staff? Providing diverse training opportunities and having an employee engagement survey or a suggestion box. Like those last two things are things that don't cost any money, but great suggestions that we can certainly implement some kind of electronic way to do that. From an operations efficiency standpoint, so investing in quality software programs to assist our staff in completing their tasks more efficiently. Not all software is needed. Not all software is created equal, but certainly the right technology, given the right circumstances, can greatly help improve staff capacity, allowing them to maybe focus their time somewhere else if they can become more efficient in a certain task. So as our city grows, how can we incorporate those things? Some examples that were suggested, a parks community center scheduling program, using auto pay for our utility billing, creating a work order system for maintenance. Might be a little more internal process, but maybe even if there's a Google Doc that I can send complete when I need something fixed in my office and that goes to maintenance, does that create a more efficiency for them?
That's not done now.
We don't do that now, no. We just send emails. It's great being a small organization, but at some point it's nice to have that structure as well. As we continue to build out our website, using fillable forms, making that more user-friendly for the public, making it easier for staff, I think that would be great. And an example of when we did this that worked out really well was we implemented a new phone system early 2020. And the new system, the new phones were less expensive, they had more capabilities, and we did not increase our costs. So we moved to a more efficient system. It was better for staff, and we were able to maintain the resources that we were currently using, which was great. Another item that came from this one was seeking vendors citywide, not just by department. So again, getting out of our silo mentality, how do we have those structures in place for when a department needs something, we can say we have a contract with this company to provide those services citywide. I think we would see some savings efficiency potentially there. So that might be the kind of thing from a budget perspective we'll have to start to look at to help departments seek those opportunities for reallocating costs in a better way. Our last item was our safety plan. Building security. I would say the overarching consistent theme across all departments is building security. We do need to move away from our current key system. We need to get to electronic access, fobs, key cards, whatever that might be, and potentially using video surveillance at the right places within all of our buildings. I would say this would be, from my perspective, moving the needle on this will be have one of the biggest impacts from a staff perspective that it can have. So that's going to be really important to continue to discuss this year. I would really like to see personally a plan for that by the end of the year on how we would do something like that. And in my mind, because this is a big investment, something like using our reserve funds would be appropriate in this instance, because it's a major initial cost, and then the upkeep should be minimal. Workplace ergonomics, safety training. Some departments do great, some don't do much at all. So I'd love to create more of a consistent and just whatever the right expectation for each department is, because it's going to vary. Would like to have a program throughout the city. And emergency planning. Emergencies can vary across the board, and being able to respond and adapt to them is really important. I think we have the tools to do it well. We just haven't spent the time to really talk about that. There's going to be different main point of contacts depending on if we have a storm come through. Public Works is going to be, the driver there, versus if we have an active shooter downtown, we're going to have police, right? So we have to figure out what that structure is, and the communication, how does council get communication? How does the media, all of those things. So I think emergency planning would be another one of those areas where working through those specifics as much as you can will be important. A small thing, but it was a great suggestion as I was working through this to say, what happens if the power goes out? How long does staff stay here? Can we work from home and be more effective than working here with no power? Is there maybe a standard way we can say after so many hours you go home? What does that look like? I thought, oh, that's great. I go, well, I'm happy to we'll just make the call on the fly, but what if I'm not in the building? Or what if it's just one person? How do they make those decisions? So I think that'll be really important. So what I'm hopeful to do is I'm hopeful that we can use this data as a starting point as we build out our 2022 budgets. As I mentioned, we'll incorporate all levels of staff. We'll work through those detailed questions. The detailed questions and the cost estimates will be for those top priority items for each department. So they may not have items in all 5 categories, just might not be applicable, but for those top priority items, they will have those details to be able to explain to you, this is in my budget and this is why, and help to give you that information. And then also fully developing out the 10-year capital improvement plan, which goes back to item 1 as well, but I feel like that's really important to mention. I do appreciate the council's feedback. You give great feedback when we present our information. So I'm hoping that we can continue that because we don't want to spin our wheels. We want to keep moving forward. And likely, the prioritizing will be a challenge. So we really want to know what the goals are, or do we have to create some public feedback loops on how we make these decisions? What will that be? And that's all I have. I wanted to hopefully give you a recap, give you kind of a baseline reference, show you where we're going, and answer questions.
I had one thought while we were going through this, and then you actually kind of touched on it, but, I just always, what to do with the reserve funds.
Yeah.
And without a plan, it just seems like it's too easy to dip into them.
Mhm.
So to take our reserve funds and pad some of these future, like the building, to put $100,000 in for the buildings and to divvy that up against our future expenditures. So we start and then still contribute out of the budget or out of the levy.
Yep, we keep building back in.
But right now, when you start, you're starting from nothing. So let's pad them accounts so that we do have some money there and use the reserve fund for that. But, and just like you said, for this key system here too, for something like that, if that's really the priority, and, I would absolutely be for that, but, and divvy that up between all the departments comparative to what their needs are. But I would think that would be an awesome way to take our reserve funds and do something with them that's productive.
My only comment is, and I appreciate the putting this together, and I appreciate the input that the department heads and people in the staff have had. But, having done these kinds of things myself, and when I was working, the one thing I just want to make sure that all staff knows is it doesn't matter what position you're in. If you're a bar back or you're the chief of police, everybody has opinions, everyone has ideas. Throw them out there, please, because it's that's how we're going to move forward. It doesn't matter. Everyone has, we want to hear from everybody.
Yeah.
With this. And so, it'll be interesting to move forward.
I agree. Yeah, I think it'll be important. And I'm, I do it as well where, if you get some feedback or a comment or something from someone, it may not register really that this is really important or something they want further analysis on. So we have a way now to be able to say, well, we document it. This is part of this process. We're going to document, and it goes the distance, so to speak, so that we all see that. And in case it might spark some other idea or some other, need, we have it there. So I think it's great.
I think it also forces follow through.
Mhm.
It won't get by the wayside and down. It'll, and if the next couple of years we can get this implemented to this is just how the city operates, it's got a good chance of continuing to go beyond this council and to the next.
And hopefully gives a way too, where maybe if you see an idea for the first time and you might say, okay, there's potential here. I'd like to see, these 3 pieces of information or some, here's what I want over the next year for you to pull together to bring back to support this, or, it just provides that as well. So I think that will be really helpful.
One thing you did touch on was in the safety aspect and then the training and things like that. Does all staff participate annually in AWARE training?
No.
That's a problem. I'm sure it'll be addressed. Cool. Okay.
And there are some things that we do every single year because we've done it every single year. maybe getting some outside concerns, private concerns to do some of the work that we do in-house might be cheaper, might be better, quicker. I don't know.
Certainly, yeah.
Mhm.
All things to look at, so.
Good thought.
So yeah, I will, we will continue to bring the 2022 details as part of our budget process. And we'll go from there. That's all I had.
Thank you.
Yep.
I just want to say too, that I've read this with Mark and I mean, I agree. With everything, some of the stuff like we're already trying to do and
I did forget to mention, sorry, Mark, that you had given me some info, so your turn.
Mark, do you want to talk about this real quick?
Yeah, I was brain trusting with Jenny last week, but with the liaison with the Parks and Rec, I've been trying to make them think outside the box, think bigger, not, oh gee, what we need, 6 months, this and that. I'm kind of tired of throwing money, good after bad money into the, buying chill, replacing chill, that kind of stuff. So I was trying to make them think outside the box more towards starting at a smaller rec center to build upon it. The other thing too is just one thing that I was bouncing with Jenny too is now that the city's growing and with development, and I think John and I talked about this too, is Brittany and Tom need to be joined at the hip on that. So they said on the developers, because Brittany has the ordinance, Tom knows what all needs to be done, sewer, water, so forth like that. Also, looking at the amount of paperwork that Brittany and Tom have is possibly having an administrative assistant that they can split. You know what I'm saying? So they have one, we hire one, they can help out both sides. Another thing, like I was telling Jenny too, it'd be kind of nice if that person also would have a want to learn regulations so that they could also go out and start inspecting on site with development. That's just an idea. These are just ideas I put out there. Also looking at the possibility to free up more time for Tom. I know Tom's a get my hands dirty kind of guy, but having his two top guys maybe be supervisors. But I don't know, Jenny, if this is something that, because it's, it's goals for me. I don't know if it's goals for these guys, but is there a way, if they're agreeable with it, to bring these to these department heads, just say, this is kind of what they're looking at?
Well, I'm certainly happy to share ideas. I mean, anytime, as we're starting to move forward, I do think we're going to be looking at, some growth, some changes over the next, however many years. So we need to be planning for that as thoughtfully as possible. So I'm happy to share it.
Okay.
So they're thinking about it.
Right. So Amber's got to look at the fact that with the increase of parks, she's going to need more employees, at least one, to help with everything.
Sure.
I see a lot. And why didn't we buy the Spirits building?
well,
Let's
that's
not go into
complicated.
details.
Number one, you can't buy something that's not for sale.
Correct.
Moving it is not an easy.
No, but initially when did Schaefer's decide, we're going to put up a building here, and then the city said, we'll lease it as the Spirits?
You got to go back in the history and know the history.
Yeah.
It was a conjunction between the city and Schaefer's.
Right. So, could we as the city look at buying it now? Because that thing would have been bought and paid for many times over.
He doesn't want to sell it.
We did go down this road.
Okay.
We did go down this road. The one part about it that comes down to, and we looked at where the bank was trying to put a liquor store. We looked at some different options. But the one thing that, and it's hard to gauge, but you move that to the wrong location,
You're going to lose money.
you could kill it.
Right.
Right now, with it being at the parking lot, the Schaefer's,
Mhm.
I'll guarantee that more than makes up for what we're probably over. So,
As
and
my
that's
dad-
something that we, it doesn't, but,
As my dad said, it's not for sale until the right price comes about.
well.
And I'm
that
not
was-
saying,
And that was,
but-
and we're gonna be talking about that again, but I'm just saying, we've gone down that road. And it's not it's not a simple,
Oh, I know it isn't.
not a simple answer.
Oh, I know it isn't, but, you know, from returning from the north, there's not a single one up there that is not owned by the city.
There's what?
There's not a single municipal liquor or on or off sale that is not owned by the city,
Right, agree.
by its municipality. And yeah, I just always wondered why it was never purchased outright. And the other thing too is I know you cannot merge the pickle and the spirits together because the spirits does well where it is. And as a, you know, local, I like where the pickle is.
Well, one of the problems was the liquor store, the off sale at the pickle factory, that was the off sale for how many years?
Right.
It just isn't big enough.
No, it's not.
It's not. It's a convenience now. It's more of a convenience liquor store, if you want to call it that. So anyway, but that's something that you and Ross can get together and talk about.
Okay.
And he
Yeah,
can bring you
'cause I
up to
got-
speed on it.
Yeah,
Okay,
I got,
okay.
all right.
Nothing else? Okay, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
So be it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
When you're talking about the chillers going bad and the ice rink and stuff, moving